All right, the next topic we are going to look at is shape the interaction. This includes the modules wait time, appropriate prompting, and let the child lead. And this is where it falls on our MasterPal framework. All right, wait time. Wait time is a really key component in learning. And this is why wait time is a good way to think about it and understand its purpose is to think of it as think time. When wait time is provided, kids are given the opportunity to fully think through what they're being asked to respond about. And that thinking is part of the learning. So when thinking is short-circuited, then the learning is short-circuited. And for our kids with complex needs, this becomes even more important. So there's a great video that captures the role of wait time in a general education classroom. And it emphasizes that everything about the quality of the interaction, both for the student and the teacher, is increased when wait time is given. So what I think is really compelling, there's an article that's linked here at the bottom, but it talks about how 3 seconds of wait time increases lots of characteristics related to learning in positive ways. And that increase is from a second and a half. So from a second and a half to 3 seconds, there's a lot of growth and improvement. For our kids with complex needs, however, it's very likely that even more wait time is needed. And 10 seconds of wait time, or even 5 seconds, can feel like an eternity. But oftentimes, our kids might need 15 or 30 or more of wait time. It supports their processing. It might support their vision, so their ability to visually attend and take in and process what they should be responding about. It might support their coordination and motor planning, and for some kids, it's all of these. I have a great video that I unfortunately don't have permission to share, but I'll just briefly describe it to you. A child is a young boy, I think he's about third grade. He's listening to a switch adapted music on a switch adapted radio player. And he is loving it. He's jamming out. The music goes off, and he has to activate the switch to turn it back on. And he waits for 55 seconds, according to the timeline at the bottom of the video. And the whole time, his body seems very quiet. But if you look really closely, you can see a little bit of finger movement, a little bit of like shifting of his body. His eyes start to rest on the switch on his tray. And at 55 seconds, his arm reaches back in this very full motion, and he comes down square on the device. He really needed that time. He needed it for the motor planning and the coordination. I think processing wise, he understood pretty quickly what he needed to do, but it took that time in order for him to be able to execute. So as we wait and observe, noticing that changes in behavior can indicate that the brain is thinking, the body is thinking, so to speak, in order to show learning and participation. So when we think of it as when we recognize that it is think time, for some kids it's also really important that the waiting around that think time is quiet. Talking, touching, moving can be distracting, and for some kids it can reset their wait time. So if a child requires 30 seconds of wait time, and during that time there's continued prompting. What do you think? Where is it? Look at your device. Go ahead. It's your turn. Answer. In that time, all of those prompts can actually reset their wait time. So every time a prompt is given, the 30 seconds starts over. It's very student specific, so you really do have to get to know your kids, get to know your child, and figure out what does wait time look for them. Does it vary by communication partner, by activity? Motivation is often a factor as well. Appropriate prompting is the next conversation, and we use a prompting scaffold success, and it's really important that we do this thoughtfully and appropriately so as not to undermine our efforts. A prompt is a supportive level of cueing to move one to action, and the goal here is to foster ownership of communication skills so that kids understand that their unique voice is being heard. Kate Ahern developed this really lovely prompting hierarchy that is very specific to AAC. And we need to just, before we start with a prompting hierarchy, recognize that prompts should only be used as much as is necessary and only for as long as necessary. Prompting hierarchy should be faded out as quickly as possible. But a couple of elements that I think are really important. This prompting hierarchy starts with the use of aided language. So recognizing that there has to be a lot of language in the environment before we can really support elicited responses. Also, motivation is key. We don't respond about things that aren't important to us, aren't interesting to us, so motivation is an important part. And then wait time is described at every level of the prompting hierarchy. So as we move from expectant pauses to indirect and direct cues, and more some indirective models, some suggestions. We provide wait time at every level so that kids can have the opportunity to respond. A prompting hierarchy, the way that we use this is we start with a most support to a least amount of support when we're introducing a new skill. This gives positive practice and helps teach, helps with the learning. But once the expectation of a skill or once it is established, then we want to flip that and we want to use the least to most because that gives kids the opportunity to do as much as possible on their own without prompting. And then we meet them where they are and help them the rest of the way. Prompting dependence is something we absolutely want to avoid. It emerges from a mismatch of the prompting level mismatches the student's understanding or skill level. So we don't want to provide too much prompting. Using wait time appropriately as part of this. And then again, interactions which elicit compliance and not communication can also emerge from or also result in prompt dependence. A word about hand underhand, more most level of many prompting hierarchies, you'll see physical support or hand over hand. And I wanted to just take a moment to differentiate the difference. Hand over hand can be very intrusive. It is the most intrusive. Hand over hand, if somebody does that to you, chances are you are going to pull back. If you're pulling back, you're not learning. Or you're going to become passive and be like, hey, they got it. And you're not learning. So we use hand underhand as a way to demonstrate respect and be less pushy. Hand underhand gives control to the learner and encourages their participation, but doesn't require it. So when I do hand underhand, I get my hand ready for modeling and I invite the child to put their hand on top. I often say hop on as my cue, but they can pull off at any time. That's okay. I still have their attention. They've still observed and perhaps gotten some, perhaps a little bit of a motor engagement in that as well. So we want to wait expectantly and recognize how important wait time is as we're encouraging AAC use and also use that as a tool to gauge our own appropriate use of a prompting hierarchy. Let the Child Lead is a module that really addresses engagement and meeting the child in their where they are. Learning emerges from meaningful social emotional experiences is a statement that was made to me that when I first heard it, it really encapsulated so much of the passion that I have for teaching and communication. So this is meeting a child in their space is the first step in building relationships and fostering communication to support learning. We need to honor the fact that many children travel on this journey from being preoccupied with things in the environment, either out of preference or out of sensory seeking needs. And that might somewhere in there, we can figure out how to lead them to joint attention. But recognizing that kids may travel this journey from preoccupation to joint attention before they become early emergent communicators, and certainly before they demonstrate ownership of learning, communicating, and being a social partner. When we come to the table with an agenda of making them that social partner before we've recognized where they are in that journey, it can be difficult to figure out how to support them. So this module explores a variety of strategies that allow us to recognize when a child is at different stages of learning and how to get them to a place of joint attention so that we can then, dovetail into supporting their communication. So just a snapshot of what this looks like. Getting on the child's level, not low, but actually on their level, literally eye to eye, can play a big part in making them feel safe and not intimidating in an interaction, responding relevantly to what they're doing. So commenting on their actions or joining them in their actions in the way that they are playing rather than having our own way of doing it. Shifting our attention when they shift theirs shows them and that we don't have an agenda and we're not going to make them do anything and can really be instrumental in building trust. And also allowing them to explore or experiment in their own way. We as grown-ups often have ideas about how we how toys should be played or how activities should go, but leaving the outcome wide open and letting kids do it in their own way can help us on our journey. Um, Learning can only happen when a child is interested, and I think that in addition to being interested, but feel safe in that environment and in that interaction. If he's not interested, it's like throwing marshmallows at his head and calling it eating. So there's a lot of humor in that, which I think really does a nice job of getting the point across. But I think ultimately we just need to recognize that our idea of what is interesting and a child's idea of what is interesting may not be the same. And we have to sometimes surrender our own agenda and meet them where they are in order to bring them to a place where we can then um, access their availability for learning and communicating. So just a recap, we want to be a patient pal. Think time in the terms of wait time is really important for upholding the quality of instruction, both receptively and expressively. Motivate and wait at all levels of the prompting hierarchy, making sure that we're employing a prompting hierarchy effectively ensures that we're not undermining our own efforts. And it's important to be present. When we let the child lead, they establish we establish those engaging social emotional contexts around which they feel safe and valued. And from these experiences, we have the opportunity to support learning.